about what we're doing with our annual plan, and I've informed them about this meeting, so we probably will have a couple of people from the media watching our live stream today.
So everybody mind your P's and Q's, including me. Some muffled voice in the background reminded me of that too.
Okay, Mayor Allen, we're live.
Okay, thanks, Grace. Okay, Tony, Colin, let's get going now. Just so everybody's clear, we have an hour on this and an hour only, so it must conclude 11:30. So if there's any questioning, please keep it to the presentation, very high level. I know you've all been sent a copy of with a whole lot of other facts and figures and everything. This workshop is not about that. It's just to give you a taste of what's actually in the budget. What we're dealing with is the annual plan presentation that Colin's going to run you through, which was actually sent out to everybody yesterday. So that is what we're going to deal with. So if there are any questions, please raise your hand, indicate, and keep your questions purely to the presentation. All right, away you go, Colin.
Thanks. If we can just get the presentation up on the screen. Thank you. While we're doing that, great. Just to read, the purpose of the workshop is to basically provide information to support the annual plan adoption, which is not at this workshop. This workshop makes no decisions as to adopting the annual plan or the contents of the annual plan. It's just to inform what is in the proposed annual plan for adoption later on. So it focuses on changes to year 3 of the LTP, the rating year and financial year 2020 and 2021, and what the next steps are in terms of getting the annual plan to the stage where it can be adopted. So the annual plan is a plan for 1 year of the long-term plan. This is the plan for year 3 of the LTP. We have not done any general consultation on this because there is no. Sorry, next slide. We don't need to consult if there's nothing significant. The figures in the annual plan are not audited. However, the contents of the and what is disclosed in the annual plan are audited for legislative compliance. So, in other words, we have the right. We have the financial statements in it. The contents of the financial statements themselves are not organised, but not all audited, but but they are included, etc. So that's the only auditing aspect of the annual plan. So now turning to the proposed annual plan, what we've got so far in the annual plan is, I'll go through quickly the updated assumptions. We've amended the depreciation for what was in the annual plan to take into account the work program that's occurred in the last 2 years, or the first 2 years of the long-term plan. We've adjusted the opening balances, obviously, because we know.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt. Very sorry to interrupt, but the audio is very unclear. Are you aware of that?
Very aware of it, but it's the best we can do at this stage.
Good to know.
I will just come and sit closer to the microphone, and that might help.
Thank you.
Perhaps I'll sit to the side of the chair. Well, that's fine.
That's better, Colin. Just stay where you are.
Okay, cool. Can you put it on, put it on full? No, that's okay. That's fine.
If I do that.
That's okay. I'll carry on. No problem. Okay. So we've adjusted for opening balances. Because our opening balances have changed, we have interest on internal loans and reserves, and loans and reserve balances carried forward into the annual plan year of change, and there's an impact for that. Where decisions have been made by Council in the prior 2 years, and the first 2 years of the LTP, which impact on this coming proposed annual plan year, those have been included. Gearing for Growth and Greatness project, which was signed off and supported by the councillors 2 years ago, after the adoption of the long-term plan. Those impacts are included in this proposed annual plan, and an assessment of the COVID-19 impacts, and those will come through as I go through the presentation. There was only one consultation required in terms of the proposed annual plan, and that is for unmetered water usage on a small number of properties in the district, to make sure there's a level playing field for people paying for the water they have consumed on their properties. So on to the next slide. Now, the impact of those updates on the proposed annual plan is, the proposal is to keep the general rate increase as per the LTP. That's what's included in the proposed annual plan, and no changes to the LTP targeted rates. So they stay as per the LTP, with the possible amendments still to be adopted or otherwise by the council on the current consultation process for the unmetered water properties. And there'll be a little bit more detail about that going forward. We've assumed that the general accounting reserve fund is replenished by the anticipated general rate surplus for this year. Now, general accounting reserve fund at the current moment is in deficit for about $480,000. And on top of that, council have approved $250,000 to be funded from the general accounting reserve fund for the community facilities. However, as we go through, we finish this financial year 2019-20, we anticipate a small surplus to carry forward, or for the councillors to determine what to spend that money on, and that's still to be decided. We haven't got a proper idea, or we haven't got a clear idea of what that surplus will be at this stage. Just on that, the last point on that previous slide is the district plan funding. Will need to be resolved through the long-term plan. The costs we've incurred so far for the district plan for the 10-year period 2021 to 31 have been unfunded, and they are proposed to be unfunded for the annual plan year and to be dealt with and funded through the long-term plan. Okay, thank you. On the next slide. So, how have we got to a point where we can propose to keep the general rates as per the long-term plan? We've had additional above LTP growth in the district for the first 2 years of this LTP period, and that flows through into the proposed annual plan year, and that gives us about $1.3 million. Our capital expenditure work program completed is less than what we'd anticipated is lower in terms of dollars than what we anticipated in the LTP, and that results in a lower depreciation charge in the annual plan year. COVID-19 has had an impact, and we're anticipating an impact on our regulatory income. Building quality inspections down 15%, development resource consents down 20%. Gearing for Growth and Greatness, which I alluded to before, was signed off after the long-term plan was set, and there are increased costs associated with that and resources needed to provide for the growth that we've seen in the district. 2.9 million in their proposed annual plan, and the proposal is to not pay any remuneration increases across the whole of council for the annual plan year. So there will be no movement market and no performance payments made. And generally across this, we've made savings across other activities within the business to balance the general rate to get to a point where we are proposing to keep the general rate increase at 3.66%. For targeted rates, again, just to reiterate, we've kept those at the LTP levels, long-term plan levels, with the exception of the unmetered water, which is still to be confirmed at targeted rate, which give us funding for our water facilities of $52,000. There are solid waste increased costs of $500,000, which are included in the proposed annual plan due to additional requirements largely around safety. A portion of those are funded by the general rate. Others are funded by the solid waste reserves. or that's the proposal going forward. The capital works program. The long-term plan assumed capital works of $73 million. The annual plan, proposed annual plan, includes $51 million. The two main changes are for the water supply treatment upgrade and the water reticulation extensions, both in Takofta. That doesn't mean to say those projects are removed from the works program. They are still in the works program, and they are both scheduled to commence in the annual plan year, but later than anticipated. And the dollars shown there are the impacts of that later than anticipated, later than planned start. We expect carry forwards in terms of projects which have started and which will continue into next year, and projects which were budgeted or included in the first 2 years of the LTP, which will only start next year, of $90 million. These projects obviously remain in the work program. The work program is still to be refined based on the detailed project planning, which is currently underway. And the Council have submitted applications for shovel-ready projects to be funded by the government. These are not included in the proposed annual plan. If we were to include them, we would have to have certainty about funding, and we don't have certainty of funding. And these projects were not included in the long-term plan in any event. These are additional to, which is the requirements for application for funding for these projects. The next slide is basically just listing the activities which the whole organization is undertaking, which informs not only the proposed annual plan, which is to be discussed in this workshop, but also informs the LTP for 2021-31. So there's a lot going on, a lot coming into that, which is quite exciting, all the change and all the improvements that are coming through in the organization. I don't think there's any need to go through those individually. Councillors will be aware of all of those items. So just to sum up, proposed annual plan includes a general rate increase of 3.66%, which is as per the long-term plan. The proposed annual plan includes targeted rates, the same as what was included in the long-term plan, plus the still to be approved unmetered water rate. The General Accounting Reserve Fund deficit is assumed to be addressed by the general rate surplus for this year. The district plan costs and the solid waste increased costs are to be revisited in the long-term plan going forward for 2021-31. And the assumed COVID-19 impacts on our revenue are covered by general rate growth and activity savings. In other words, savings in our costs. And essentially that's a quick summary of what's in the proposed annual plan. Next steps, obviously, after this workshop is to take into consideration the feedback from the councillors in this workshop, and then present the annual plan for adoption at the next council meeting on, I believe it's on the 29th of June. I think I will leave it at that, and give your worship the floor back.
Thank you, Colin. So look, as I said before, everybody, I need to have questions based on the presentation, not on the detail. This is very, very high level and we're very short for time. So I'll go for the first speaker, which was Noel Smith, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. The commentary by our presenter has indicated that the General Accounting Fund will be 400,000 short. At the end of last year, and you mentioned Whara, Colin, at the end of last year, there was about a $2.5 million surplus in the general rates, and Council supported moving $250,000 of that surplus into a reserve, which was the seed funding for the Whara community. and it is therefore on that basis the council supporting the community went out to other funders based on that seed funding being there. I'm incredibly disappointed to see or hear that the staff have failed, and I say failed, to put that funding aside in a reserve, and we are now looking to fund it from another general rate surplus when we had it in the funds last year. So please explain, and I've got to direct this to the Chief Executive, why you did not follow Council's direction. Thank you.
What's that?
So through you, Your Worship, the $250,000 commitment is included, Councillor Smith. So it is currently in as part of the deficit in the General Accounting Reserve Fund. It's not a conversation that we're having in this annual plan. And as Colin has said, that deficit, which includes the whata amount, is to be funded by the general rate surplus.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I just have this? Council, after the last review of the surplus for the year 12 months ago, said take 250,000 from that surplus and put it into a reserve away from the General Accounting Reserve Fund.
Can I help here if everybody just mutes for a second? So, Councillor Smith, what Tony has actually said to you, the $400,000 deficit in the General Accounting Reserve Fund would only be 150,000 because 250,000 of the 400,000 is actually your money.
Well, it's the community's money, so not mine.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean, but it is the community money, so it's actually there. It's actually
I appreciate
there. It's already counted on.
To say it's included in a deficit, I think is wrong. It was there in a surplus to be taken and put in a reserve. It may be semantics, but the reality is this community has credible suspicions that the council is trying hard not to present this facility. And hearing that from the Chief Operating Officer does not help.
Okay, be assured it's counted. Look, I'm going to move on because there's other people with questions. Councillor Sedgwick.
Thank you very much. Just a very brief query. I see that the approximately 20 million for Te Kauwhata's infrastructure is deferred, but to be attended to at some point in this year. But I have a greater concern in respect of the water treatment plant, which is not included in both those. And I wonder if, how do we address that within this annual plan, considering that it is a matter of urgency?
Tony?
No, because it would have been highlighted here if it wasn't needed.
Have you got an answer, Tony? Otherwise,
I don't, Your Worship. Colin's just trying to find it.
All right, I'll go to another question while we wait for it because of time. Is anyone else? Gabrielle.
Yep, thank you. The question I had is, it's saying that the solid waste review is going to feed into the LTP. So my question is that actually going to happen, or is it going to be so delayed that it in fact won't feed into the LTP?
Look, this is actually not about LTP, what we're dealing with here at the moment. This is the third year of an LTP. So the LTP is the bit that goes forward from here. So yes, it will feed into next year's LTP. So I think you're actually mixing the two up. This presentation. No, hang on. This is actually not about the LTP. That is for next year. So the solid waste review will be done over and completed before the LTP, which we will be dealing with in 12 months' time. So I want you to deal with what's on the screen and don't bring other stuff that's not on the screen to it, please.
No, I'm not. It says district plan on my screen. It says district plan and solid waste funding to be revisited in LTP. So it does say that on the screen.
Yes.
That's why I'm asking the question.
But you asked specifically about the review to do with the solid waste, and it will be in the LTP. This is an annual plan. I think this is where you're getting crossed up between the two.
No, I'm not getting crossed up. I'm asking for clarity, because if it wasn't going to feed into the LTP, then there might be a question, because it's not accurate in here. So I'm just asking for clarification about that.
Be assured it is going to be.
Okay. Can I just
Right,
ask
any other-
another question on that, please? Is that in the reading materials, it says here on page 5 under refuse and recycling that the solid waste review has determined that a phased approach to changes to the solid waste service is preferred. And then it says this means no overall change to the level of service is proposed for the next 4 years. So why is it saying that?
Sorry, look, I'm sorry, Gabriel, you're moving into detail, and that's not what this presentation is about. You're actually reading the detailed report that is actually for the LTP. This I'm dealing with what's on your screen, which Colin just ran through, and that level of detail is not there. You're going back into the report. And that's where I said, I don't want to go because we don't have the time to deal with that.
Okay.
And yeah.
Cool, thanks.
So Your Worship, just in regard to Councillor Sedgwick's question around the TK water, there's still some caveats in the annual plan, Councillor Sedgwick, to commence that works. Just that the bulk of it is expected to be required in the following year.
Sorry, just to clarify, for the wastewater treatment.
Sorry, for water.
You said water.
No, I said waste. I apologise. I said that there was 20 million in there for water supply and reticulation. And my question was, what is in the annual plan, if anything, to address the urgent issue of the continual breaches since 2015 of the Te Kauwhata wastewater supply treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant.
So that's a renewal plant.
Yeah, so there's certainly a commitment to continue with that works, Councillor Sedgwick. The
immediate works for this year or the works on the longer term issue? I'm not concerned about that. It's what are we doing right now, because we're currently in breach.
Yeah, so in terms of both those issues, there's some funding within the annual plan.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Church.
Thank you, through your worship. It is part of their slides, and it is on the bottom of page 5 as part of the key assumptions. And I'm thinking of the female staff of council. It says there's going to be no remuneration increases. So I assume that the gender pay gap that we have with for female staff is not being picked up in the annual plan. Is that a piece of work that is going to be discussed and progressed within the LTP?
Well, probably my obvious question while I'm thinking of an answer is, why do you think it assumes just a female staff?
Well, we're talking about the State Services Commission, which are actually progressing and identifying within the public sector. So I can happily to send everyone through the chat the Commission's working program at the moment, which is of May 2019, that shows that the public service has a gender pay gap. So I'm just really asking that if we're not going to increase the pay, that we're identifying that piece of work when we will progress that, because it's a bigger issue than just the annual plan. So just clarification from council staff would be helpful.
Well, through your worship, so what we can say is that it's now information that we do review. So I guess it's fair to say that we're still unpacking exactly what it means for us, because as councillors may be aware, it's actually like quite a complex it's quite a complex thing to understand. So it's not a very simple exercise in terms of saying, is there pay equity? We certainly, when we recruit people, we are certainly trying to ensure that, that there's balance, and that we certainly don't prefer candidates based on anything other than the right person for the role, and we are very conscious of making sure that we're actually paying what the market is for that role, notwithstanding who the candidate is. So we've got a number of processes in place to make sure that we are recruiting the right people into those roles. But Councillor Church, in terms of the whole gender issue, all I can say to you at this stage is that it's certainly information that we are receiving, we're conscious of it, but we're probably still unpacking exactly what it is telling us, given the complex nature of it.
Yeah, through your chair. Actually, it's not about who you're employing, because I know that we have equitable ways that we do it. And looking and just asking about the retrospective gender pay gap in council that's identified, because it's in the whole of the public centre. It's not the fact of do we have one, it's the fact that we do have one for the retrospective for existing staff, not the new staff that I'm asking about. And if we were going to address it, obviously it's said here in the annual plan we are not, that we are asking that we identify it and progress it through the LTP, because if there's a retrospective ongoing gender pay gap that affects our LTP costings, and I'd just like to think that it's a piece of work that we will progress if it's not through the annual plan.
So, Your Worship, that's certainly a conversation we can have with Council.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Your Worship. Carry forwards, obviously not having, as a newly elected member, not having historical context, 90 million for carry forwards. How does that compare to previous years? Is that roughly on par? It seems to me quite a sizable figure to be carrying forward. How do previous years compare?
Not if you've been around long enough, it's not. I think it was actually higher last year by about 30 million, I think. I don't know, Tony, I might be wrong.
It was about 130 million last year going forwards. And there's been some focus during the year by particularly Roger's team on getting that number down in terms of taking out projects which are no longer approved or required. And that is a task which will be done going forward, and I think perhaps Roger can speak more about what the focus of that is.
Well, I guess, Your Worship, through you, you recall that one of the, that there's some significant waters infrastructure within the carry forward, and you'll be aware as councillors that we had sort of, I guess, deliberately focused on the water care agreement, such that we could transition those works into that support arrangement. And we know that Watercare are currently working really hard to progress a number of those waters projects. So I think we're clearly now, I guess, in a position where we will make some good inroads into that capital works program. And it's certainly, as you know, through the workshops that you've had recently, led by Mr. McCulloch, that is a focus in terms of how we can progress those works more effectively going forward.
Look, I think the thing is with carry forwards have been around as long as I've been around, which is a number of years, and all I would say is one of the options that we do have, and it'll be probably make up part of our LTP discussions later this year, is to seriously look at having what we call a year off. Well, and what do we mean by a year off? It's a year of actually not apportioning a work program of that magnitude, so they actually can catch up, because some of these date back a number of years and we can't catch up if we keep throwing more in. So, and this is not unique to us by any means. I would say every council, and especially the growth councils across New Zealand, have got exactly this problem. We just physically can't get the work done that we actually program to be done. So maybe one of the ideas is to use the term and having a gap year where we don't throw more into the barrel and give them a chance to catch up. So that is a discussion for probably later this year or early next year. Rightio, who's next?
Axel.
I can't see him. Axel? Oh, sorry, he's in there, that's right. Councillor Beck.
I'll come closer to the microphone. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge within Colin's presentation on behalf of staff that there is a zero remuneration round for staff within that. And I also wanted to acknowledge the Chief Executive who has personally also gone through a salary sacrifice, and it's worth noting, and it's worth recognising because it's part of the spirit that they bring to us achieving what we wish to achieve as a community. I also acknowledge that to get to year 3 of an LTP and to be able to be about right in terms of budgeting also, underlines the care with which our staff have actually steered the ship. What I do want to say is that we are in exceptional circumstances, so I wonder, Mayor Allen, whether there's an opportunity to maybe get some commentary from yourself as well on whether we should try and recognise the hurt, the economic pain in our community as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown that we've been through. We've recently received an economic survey that underlines the hurt that's there. We know it's there. We know it's real. We are still looking at small accounting surpluses within the GAR fund and so on. And I just wondered, Mayor Allen, if you had some thoughts around whether we can go even further rather than just staying with the projected increase.
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor Beck. Yeah, look, I have got some thoughts on it. I was waiting to hear from other people within the Zoom. But look, I know it's indicated at 3.66 within our LTP, and I take on board your commentary around the fact that we've actually, in year 3 of a 3-year LTP, have actually, believe it or not, it probably ended up with in a relatively good position in respect to, because past history would have us, it would be back out consulting in that 3rd year because of a number of issues, which meant the budgets were under pressure. Not to say they're not still under pressure at the moment, but I noticed with a 3.66%, there's probably an opportunity to see whether we can actually squeeze a little bit of juice out of the tank to actually show that there is some good faith. But I just remind everybody that every cent we take out that 3.66 means that somewhere we could run into a deficit, and we are a not-for-profit organisation who tries to run a budget that runs with little or no surplus, but on the mark all the time. So by taking a bit out, we'll have to give a little bit up somewhere else around something around to do with some work or some programs that may be running. But I might suggest that if we, look, even if we dropped it a few points down to possibly 3.49 or something like that, to actually show at least some slight movement to show good faith. But yeah, look, I think if we can do that, at least we can show we've tried. It's easy for people like myself who understand the business, deal with the business on a daily basis and say we need every penny to keep ourselves going, and keep ourselves afloat. But I just remind everybody of the commentary that came out of the Minister of Local Government, Nanaia Mahuta, who said she does not want councils who have indicated a increase in their 3rd year to actually cut that, because they understand that the TLAs or the councils are very, very much an integral part of actually helping getting this country back up and going through, as we were just talking about, the $90 million carry forwards. If we could bring that work online faster, we would actually have a lot more people employed. So they're looking to us to actually support them, and we can't do that if we don't have sufficient funds to be able to carry that work out. So I've got Councillor Smith with his hand up, so I'll jump to him and then to Councillor Maguire.
Firstly, Councillor Beck, thank you for raising this, and the Mayor absolutely support, if we can, trim the budget. My only, before settling on a figure or whatever, I think the staff need to go away and look at the what opportunities there are, and particularly looking at the comments that were made earlier, the 90 million, some of those projects have been around for a while. So the costings on them may no longer be relevant, and the only way they generally do is go up. So look, I just perhaps would suggest that we ask the staff before we deal with this in late June, in the next week or so, to actually go away and do some work where, if they can, I know they've done the work already, but if they can look at it and prune it, and that would help some in our community benefit. But also against that, look at these projects going forward to make sure that our budgets are realistic and that we can actually afford to do some training. Thank you.
Yeah, look, just before I go to Councillor Maguire, can I just say that, I think it's important we do revisit it and actually look at where those opportunities are, and every dollar or a half percentage point or whatever we take off this does benefit people within the district regardless. So it is an opportunity for staff to go away and do their work. Councillor Maguire, and then I think Councillor Patterson wants to say something.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't agree with either of you or Councillor Beck. I think we've got to stick to it, like the two ministers have indicated, because I've been around long enough to know if you start cutting, you struggle to get back what you had. And when we trimmed the budget in 2008, 2007, sort of thing, 9, we still not back to where we were. And we took a lot out of that. I think we trimmed 10 million out of the budget. And back then, Gavin will be able to tell me. But if you do that, start doing that, you'll never get back what you had.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mary Ellen. Just a question on page 28, Appendix 3, for Colin. Around the figures, so just for my clarity, so in the grey line, it's got your total rates, and then you've got your general rates, targeted rates, etc. Now down third from the bottom of the targeted rates, water metered 250.69, which is the connection charge, and then it's got the water consumption, which is 522.75. Now, water consumption's charged on a separate on our water separate water rates. Does that so that 522 equates to the figure at the total rates? Should that be in there, because that's a variable?
Yes, if I can respond, thank you. It is a variable, but it's based on an average consumption for residential property of 255 cubic meters a year. And just to get some relativities between different areas and across residential, etc., we've used 255 cubic meters across at the rate we're proposing to charge for water, and it is structured as a water rate. But it's accepted that it does vary, and it does vary greatly depending on how many people live in the property, etc. And what we use the water for, but we've used an average of 255 across for the purposes of comparison.
Okay, that's fine. I just was a little bit confused around that figure there. So no, it's fine. Thanks, Colin, for that.
Right, thanks, Councillor. I just want to go back to a point that Councillor Maguire raised around wanting to stick to the 3.66. I'll just give you a little history lesson. He was actually bang on the money. Back in 2008, when the GFC came in, that had huge implications, probably far more implications than what we've actually realised now. Not to say that there's not going to be, and I think we all realise there's going to be far more implications here yet to roll out over the coming year or two. But back then, when we actually did take some pretty drastic cuts within it, I can tell you now, it took up until 2 years ago for us to even start to get back to addressing the shortfall. And part of the impact of that, cutting that out of it's left our wastewater and water accounts and huge deficits, what I'd call huge deficits, because I don't like deficits. I'm very much a pay-as-you-go person. And it was really hard because a lot of people who received those services were impacted, and their increases over the last 2 years have been substantial to catch up on that. So just be very, very careful when you give something away that is budgeted through a knee-jerk reaction. You actually, all you do is kick the can down the road and impact on people further down the track and make it harder to get out of those holes you dig for yourself. And that's exactly what happened 2 years ago. We tried to correct it, and I think we have corrected it. But if you give it up again now, you will actually lose it for another decade. And it's really hard to claw it back. Councillor Church.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things, and part of it's detailed, but it's a part of the accounting financials. Page 7, you've got the financial considerations, and I guess it's just along the same line that you've been speaking about. There's a conflict between, affordability rates and, and what we put back if we do reduce our rates. But I really note there the difference between the CPI for inflation, which is at 2.1%, and the local government cost index at 3.2%. And just from memory, I note that it's really about 1% roughly each year. That every time I see these, it's a similar gap between the two. So I really would like to, I think, a bit more understanding, particularly as we're going through the annual plan and LTP, of if it's 1% difference above every year over 10 years, that's a 10%. I'm just trying to do basic maths here. Gap between what's affordable and what people are actually being paid, or the affordability of their shopping basket as opposed to local government shopping basket. And I think these ramifications of the increased distance between the CPI and the local government cost index is quite a significant impact on us. So I'd just like to, not now, but I'd like to have that if we can get some understanding now, that'd be great. But I think we need to understand that longer term look at that gap, that pay gap.
Yeah, look, you raise a really interesting point. It's one that I've raised for many, many years, that people quote to me, our increase is at 3.66, but the rate of inflation might be only 2 or 2.5%. But in reality, the rate of inflation is predicated off primarily off food, rent, and things like that, where we actually operate on a construction index. So the construction index is our inflation rate. So, and it has been increasing. And generally what happens with that is when times are buoyant and good, which they have been for a number of years, that construction index has a tendency to grow further away from what we call household inflation actually is. And that's the tension point we face all the time. So yeah, really good point, and it's bang on the same sort of thing that I've always talked about, is we must look at the CPI because that's the one that we're actually is our true inflation point, is that. And I would suggest that probably that in reality is probably out of tune with reality as well, because that's an average figure. I would say that we've been seeing projects that have been way above that CPI increase, and that is a supply and demand, and trying to get contractors to come to us, which is not easy, or hasn't been easy up until now. Maybe it might change after this.
And Your Worship, just I've got on page 9 and page 13 recoverable consultants, and one is a negative $500,000 odd, and one is a positive $500,000. So the account numbers are 1202, 1203, and 3422, but they've got a similar. The page 13 one's a similar description. So I'm just trying to clarify $500,000 in, $500,000 out around consultants. Can I have some clarity around that, please?
It's purely an accounting control mechanism where we charge recoverable consultant costs to a cost center, and we record the recovery in a different account, different activity code, so it can be controlled and measured, and we make sure we've got those costs back.
So once
it's purely an accounting function.
Okay, and that's the last one. That was the work in progress, where we got how much millions? Work in progress, 21,978,000. What's work in progress default, mate? That's on page 14, halfway down. Work in progress default.
It's work that's underway in terms of capital, etc. Again, it's purely an accounting thing. The detail you've got here in terms of that activity summary is not necessarily just the straight P&L expenses. There are accounting entries within that. It's very hard because of our funding structure, etc. There won't be account for things that take those lines out.
So it's just for you, Your Worship. So it's just simply the capital works projects that we have in progress.
Okay. All right. Has anybody else got any questions based on the presentation? Gabrielle.
Thank you. Just really following on from what the talk about the rates increase and things, and knowing I'm a bit of a novice here, my thought is that I'm just looking at the budget as well. I just put, wouldn't it be good to keep the rates the same, but perhaps commit an amount to working more closely with the communities on the LTP and the blueprinting to really hear where the needs are? Because if it's about meeting needs in terms of responding to COVID and recovery, rather than dropping the rates, maybe keep the rates the same, but you know, is there already an amount? I'm just had a quick scan through the financials and I saw there was a disaster recovery fund. And I'm just thinking about if we're really looking at basically helping people in relation to COVID, would that be a way that the council could support the communities by really understanding very closely where the needs are through the blueprinting and the LTP? So is there an amount? Just your thoughts about that, really.
Look, firstly, the recovery fund is in reference to emergency roadworks. It seems to be with adverse weather effects over the year that we've had some years where we've had $3 or $4 million worth of unpredicted expenditure due with slips and things like that. So that's what that budget is. But your point is actually a very prudent point, because that's probably is where our thinking is going. So part of the blueprinting is to look at how we can actually work with the community for the community to take more of a hands-on approach with some of the stuff. There is no specific budget as such, except for what already sits within the budgets that we actually have, whether they be open spaces or part of someone else's budget or something within each community around a work stream. But where you're going with this, if I'm reading this right, is probably where we're wanting to go as well. So, but that's a discussion that'll happen up, you know, as part of the blueprinting work that Councillor Beck, Smith, Gibb and Sedgwick are doing at the moment. So once I've done that round and understood it, we'll look and work with the community to find solutions that actually support your thinking around that, Gabrielle.
Yeah, but that's great. That's really good to hear that, Alan. So I'm just wondering, like, is there a need to put any more funding, or do you feel like it's funded strongly enough through the work that's happening? I mean, do you need to put an extra 50 grand, 100 grand in to make sure it's done like so well that actually just, I'm not saying it's not done well, but just is there more money needed to actually make sure that's done in the way that would really give the benefit that we need?
Look, I think the thing is, and you've also raised the point around what I was saying about if we cut the projected increases by too much, we actually end up getting ourselves short of funding to be able to do exactly the sort of things you're talking about. So as a result of the work and the blueprinting workshops that are going to kick off later this month, they will actually indicate the priorities within the community, which will then feed into the LTP and work towards a funding stream for them. So keep that thought, because that's exactly what we want to hear as part of those workshops. And then we actually look to how we fund it as part of the LTP, not as part of the annual plan that we're working on at the moment. So that is very much a discussion for the coming months.
But I don't feel like I feel like you're talking about it. I just don't feel like you really answered the question, like, is there more money needed for the blueprint team and the LTP team?
Not to my knowledge, Gabrielle, unless Tony or somebody can tell me we don't have enough money to do the consultation, which I would assume we do. Tony?
No, so Your Worship, like certainly in terms of the way in which we want to engage with our communities, we believe that we've got that supported. But if what Gabrielle is saying is, so I guess the whole sort of strategic flavour of this annual plan is about assuming that the works that we will focus on will be the economic recovery for our communities. So we know that, for example, the carry forward numbers that we've talked about being the 90 million, there's still an opportunity for councillors with the 50 odd million in year 3 plus the carry forwards of the 90 million. You're aware that there's still the opportunity for councillors to think about that investment to ensure that it is investing in the areas that will deliver you what you're looking for in terms of both economic and social engagement and capital, if you like. So So that's still something that you've got the flexibility to do. But in terms of sort of working through the process, we believe that we've got the resources to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gabrielle. Rightio, need to round this up, everybody. Councillors, anybody else before I go to Councillor Church that wants to raise something first? Because she'll probably be the last speaker. All right, Councillor Church.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a bit of clarity around the Raglan. We've got $500,000 that we're to support the Raglan solid waste process, which is part coming out of the district-wide funding and the Raglan refuse, but then also the general rate fund. And I'd just note that onto page, I think right at the end, can't remember the page 23, whatever it is, where we're showing the targeted rate per of our towns, so that the Raglan's about $80 less for that targeted rate for solid waste than the other towns. And I recall this from the previous LTP, we had a similar difference. So could just get a bit more understanding as to, is it anticipated that will be picked up as part of the refuse recycling to be in all of our towns will be in the same targeted rate going forward? That's on page 28.
So look, before Tony thinks up the answer to that, I'll give you my on it. Okay, so I think as part of the waste review that all those questions will be brought into play. The history has it with Raglan, they opted for a different level of service many years ago and pay accordingly. The finer details you've mentioned are, yeah, look, they're there obviously, and I haven't actually picked up on them and can't remember them off the top of my head. But yeah, look, I think all this sort of thing will need to be addressed as part of the LTP and more importantly as part of the solid waste review. But maybe Tony has got a view at the moment.
So, Your Worship, I agree with what you've just said in terms of the different level of service.
Yeah.
The additional costs that Council is aware of in delivering the solid waste service. So there are things like the additional disposal costs, the increased costs associated with health and safety. Those are, I guess, have been well publicised in terms of the cost to this business. So what we're suggesting is that they will be picked up as part of the engagement through the next long-term plan. And the funding that you referred to, Councillor Church, around the amount picked up by the general rate, that's the proportion of those additional costs that are in respect of waste services for our public spaces. So specifically a general rate contribution for the public good portion of it. So it's not about the general rate contributing towards a service that should be supported by the targeted rate.
Yeah, so like I'm really supportive of the innovations that Raglan does around solid waste, and we can all learn from that. So completely on that page. But that question comes up because I know there's pressure in the North Waikato or in any areas of growth that public space disposal of waste, you know, like more rubbish bins in public spaces as an example, means that therefore that 150,000 that's taken out of that, I infer that, you know, if we have requests for them or needs that we won't be able to have the budget for it. So you know, I'm happy to take that offline, but just so the understanding for you know, as well as to what we can and can't do because of that. And also if we're looking at solid waste as a obviously district-wide set rate like we do on others, it's like, yeah, is that going to be in line or not, and why not? So yeah, that's quite a lot of money out of that public disposable budget.
All right, good points, and they should and will be picked up through the review though. All right, everybody, I'll have to bring the Zoom to a conclusion at this stage. Thank you, everybody. As usual, it's always good to see our community board chairs and community committee members that actually show up to this. So thank you very much. Do appreciate your input. And I'm not sure when the next one's planned, but one of these days we'll have to get back to all having one face-to-face instead of doing the Zoom thing. I know Tony and some of the team are actually in the office where I'm heading to now for an afternoon hooey. yeah, we probably need to improve on the technology in the building, Tony, because it's very hard to hear the likes of yourself and Colin. So yeah, let's try and improve on that. Spend a little bit of the
Mr.
budget
Mayor,
on getting
Mr. Mayor,
better Zoom facilities.
Can I just say that we do have we've got plans at the moment that are being implemented to basically give us the technology we need to do these meetings better, including in the chamber and in our other meeting rooms. So this is going to get easier and easier and better and better.
Yeah, I know it's easy for some of us sitting at home with 2 computers in front of us being able to operate, and that's not so easy because I did a Zoom in the office last Friday and I couldn't wait to get home and do it from home because, man, it's far easier from home than it is to do it in there. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, staff. And Axel, you got something you want to?
Yeah, could I just pick up on and close the loop on the request, the challenge I think you did put to staff on just seeing whether we can squeeze what's there a little bit. That's not to say we will do it, but I'm just wanting some clarity for the staff as they go away and come back with that final draft. Mary Ellen, if I could. And I guess I just reinforce the point that, you know, we've left things prudently, you know, for a rainy day, and our books are in a good state. Well, I look out the window and it's raining now, so that would be my encouragement.
You mean I have to bring a raincoat for this afternoon?
I meant that not literally, but figuratively. So,
I was hoping because I got the sun looking in my window here, and I'm hoping it stays there.
But yeah, just whether you're instructing staff to have a look on that.
Yeah, look, as I said to everybody, we must always review our budgets because as we lock these in place for another 12 months, it's important we actually look to see where we can pinch every dollar or every cent out of the system. And I'm sure that the team have been working diligently on this for a number of months, even through lockdown. They were working pretty hard on this. So I just would instruct staff to look seriously as to where they can actually pinch a little bit out, and you know, any little saving we can make will actually help the ratepayers, but also remember that we still have to fulfill the obligations, as Gabrielle pointed out, that we need to do around the blueprinting and that going forward as well.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for participating.